take a moment and think about your family, what they mean to you, and what you would do for them. I'm from India, and when I was 12 years old, I saw my family slide into a deep financial crisis. My father's business had crashed, and we had to give up everything, our home, and every little comfort that we all take for granted, like having a fridge or a table at home. But my parents never compromised with the education of their children, even if that meant taking loans to put us through school. It brought me even closer to them and made me deeply empathetic towards those who were not as privileged as we once used to be. Seeing my parents rebuild their lives from scratch taught me to overcome my fear of failure. And I worked hard to do well in school and in college. As the eldest of the 3 children at home, it was important for me to start working as soon as I could, so I could contribute to the family income. So when I got my first job, it meant the world to me. For the first several years, I did not make enough money to contribute in a decent way, but I got mentorship and support that took me from strength to strength. I did well in my career, and at the age of 28, I became the managing director of and the India operations of an LA-based private equity fund. And my then boss, I think Madhu Vijayan, is somewhere here in the audience today. Soon, I was able to buy a home for my family, our first own home in 16 years since we had lost our previous home, and things had begun to look better. It was 5th April 2007, and I was on my way back from work when I got a call from my dad. And on the phone, he told me that my cousin brother Shivam had met with an accident. You see, for me, Shivam was more than a cousin. His family was going through a similar crisis as we had. And in this feisty, full of life 16-year-old, I saw myself. I was a mentor to him, and to me, he was like a son. So I started rushing home, and even as I was doing that, I got another call from my dad. And he told me that Shivam had passed away. I felt the world come crashing down on me at that point of time. The next day, after cremation, I went to the site of the accident and tried to understand what had really happened. I started talking to people. What I learned absolutely horrified me. I learned that after being hit by a car, he was able to drag himself to the side of the road, and he asked people for help. This was 3:30 in the afternoon. A number of people stopped by, but nobody actually came forward to help him. And he bled to death on the side of the road. I couldn't understand why no one would come forward to help another person who's in distress. Why did no one even call the police? We all know what being helpless feels like, and I felt helpless at that point of time. To answer these questions, I took some time off from work, and I traveled across the country. I met with doctors, lawyers, police officers, and other affected families to understand what was really going on. And I discovered 3 things. I discovered that in the past 10 years, over 1 million people had been killed in road crashes in India. That the circumstances faced by my cousin were not isolated, and that thousands suffered the same fate by the side of the road given the lack of ambulance services in our country. And the third thing I learned was that bystanders were hesitant to help, not because of apathy, but because of the profound fear that they had of the legal and police system that existed in India at that point of time. In the past, many who had attempted to help those who were injured were subjected to legal hassles lasting a couple of decades at times. In many cases, Good Samaritans had been accused of perpetrating the accident itself by the police. But it didn't have to be that way. My cousin would have lived had passers-by come to his aid. That is when I decided to do something about it, and I established the Save Life Foundation. We started by engaging with the police, not only because it was the police that people were afraid of, but also because, given the lack of ambulances, it was the police that in many cases took the injured to the hospital. Save Life till date has trained and connected through a mobile application over 10,000 responders to come to the aid of injured people. But my aim was to change the framework around how Good Samaritans were treated in India. And in doing that, enable a lot more people to come forward and help those who were injured. This required me to work full-time with the foundation, give up my job, even though my corporate salary at that time was funding a large part of the foundation's operations, including the police training program that we had been running. That is when I received the Rolex Award for Enterprise. And that enabled me to take that risk, which I was so hesitant to take given my background, where I was coming from. The credibility that the award built got us a lot more support, including from Michael Bloomberg out of New York and Red Cross out of Geneva. I built a team, and I created a nationwide campaign around protection of Good Samaritans. I advocated with policymakers. I engaged extensively with the media, got public on the streets, and filed a public interest petition in the Supreme Court of India invoking our right to life and the fact that people who come to the aid of injured to save somebody need to be insulated. In a period of 2 years, hundreds of questions were asked in the Indian Parliament. 2 private member bills were introduced. Major TV shows in India started talking about the issue. And the government too, finally, began to acknowledge that something ought to be done. A few months ago, on 30th March 2016, India got its Good Samaritan law. Today, people who choose to help those in distress are completely insulated from any kind of legal or procedural hassles. We can now train hundreds of thousands of people in basic trauma care skills and know now that they will also have the confidence to use these skills, which they earlier did not. According to the Law Commission of India, this will save 1 in 2 lives lost on Indian roads. That's 500,000 lives over the next decade. Once, of course, this is effectively implemented, which is our next big challenge. If you want to know how you can track us and how we are doing, here are some ways that you can do so. But I'm sure everybody in the audience today has at least one issue that you're passionate about, that you feel for. I urge you not to suppress that feeling, to do something about it, to change the framework in which that issue is looked at. Today, more than ever before in our history, we need a lot more problem solvers in our societies. And I know that there are at least 400 of them in this room today. Thank you.